Good. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Maybe a few more people coming in. There's a few people watching us online. If you have any trouble hearing online, send me a message in the chat and I'll check the settings. Our speaker today is Guillaume Guitang. So Guillaume comes to us most recently from the University of Oxford, where he's doing his postdoctoral work, did his PhD at the Free University of Brussels, and a master's at Boya University in Cameroon. Mostly been looking at description and documentation of Chadic languages, and is coming to us today with an interesting puzzle from the semantics of some languages spoken in the northern part of Cameroon. So thank you very much for coming, Guillaume. Thanks everyone for being here. We'll look at these presentation and data for 30 or 40 minutes and then have a chance for some discussion as well.
Thank you, Joey, for the introduction. Thank you for having me, and thank you all for coming. The interesting things Joey is referring to is verb doubling in these languages. So this is actually something you see in the Chadic family in general, with quite some interesting features, like family internal and even areal patterns that you see. But today I would like to focus on just a small type or kind of verb doubling construction, and in two languages, Masana and Gizey. So I'll be talking about iconicity, but not this kind of iconicity. I guess I was happy to see this yesterday when I was trying to get a train. So definitely not this kind of iconicity. So this is the outline of the talk. So background notes. Then I'm going to introduce some data just for us to get familiar with the phenomenon. Then I'm going to zoom in on the verb doubling construction itself in those languages. Then finally, I'm going to discuss this iconic grounding of the process, making reference to the treatment of such phenomena in the literature. So some background notes. So Gizey and Masana are spoken in Cameroon and Chad. And for some authors, Gizey and Masana are the same language, and for other people, independent languages, but this is not very important. Each of them has their own specific features. So I like to call them a continuum for that reason. They are very similar in some respects and also very different. So Gizey is what you have in green here, and Masana, which is what is referred to as Masa on this map. So Gizey is spoken by about 19,000 people, and Masana 200,000 people spread across Cameroon and Chad. So some of the typological features of these languages. So these are SVO languages, and if you look at the verb specifically, because this is not very important for this talk, but I mean, since you're going to read some of the data that I present, you probably want to know that there are two classes of verbs in these languages: a high class and a low class, and the distinction is how they mark the perfective, imperfective distinction tonally, actually. So it is done through tonal morphology. So these languages have very little morphology, be it inflectional or derivational. The kinds of things that you see is the use of grammatical turn to mark past perspective, imperfective, or irrealis. So the irrealis is the kind of things you see in imperatives and conditionals. And there is one derivational morpheme for using verbs in adjectival function. So basically that's everything about the morphology that you need to know about the morphology in these languages. Now, I'm going to show you some data to begin with. And so the first thing is this this small discourse that you see. I mean, this is completely odd. I mean, if you read it from the perspective of a speaker of English, This is odd for many reasons, for many different reasons. But I structured this piece of Discord specifically because this is a pattern that you see very frequently in narratives in these languages. So there is, like, for a Gizeh or a Masa speaker, there is nothing strange in the way this discourse is organized. Now, they haven't picked up the stick and die, whether you see causation or just background, it's open to different kinds of interpretation. The most important thing I would like to draw your attention to is that actually there are two ways. I was able to collect two ways by which speakers translate that bit of discourse. And one of the ways is what you have in this example, where if you look at the glossing, the verb to take is doubled. The verb to take is doubled, and the meaning of the doubling process is not fully transparent. I mean, so we go from the English discourse, and you have the text translated, and the specific contribution of the doubling is not transparent because the past tense stuff, the event culmination meanings, etc., can be derived just from the morphology of the verb itself. That's why I say the doubling is not transparent, and there is no idea of increase in those examples. Like in most cases, when you see reduplication, iteration, kinds of phenomena, you expect this kinds of increase in meaning. You don't feel it. You don't have that interpretation in this example. The other way, Gizeh, so most of the data I'm going to show, so this is something I had to say from the start, most of the data are from Gizeh, and most of them are narrative data that I collected around 2019. So one way you can have this same bit of discourse is with the verb to take with no doubling. And I guess from this point, one needs to account for the variation. Like in one case, you have doubling. In the other case, you don't have doubling. So what accounts for this? So what you need to know is that the equivalent in Gizeh that you have with doubling is actually in the situation where you give the discourse. It was in French, actually. You give the discourse and you say, translate the discourse. You have doubling. And then in the case where you add a little bit of drama in it, like the stick is a magical stick. If you touch it, you die. In that case, not doubling. And you begin to wonder why. Like in the most neutral context, you have doubling. And in a context where you bring in some drama and you expect strange stuff to happen, nothing happens. You have the plain perfective construction that is used in most narratives. And I can't tell you that at this stage I have a clear understanding of what's happening in those data, because I don't see how adding information about the stick being a magical one changes the way it is formulated. So basically, the kinds of constructions, verb doubling constructions I am interested in is the kind you have in this example where the verb is double and the meaning is not transparent. So now let us look at the more example and the structure of the verb doubling construction in itself. So so this is actually the structure of this construction. So everything happens within a clause. So it is the domain of this phenomenon is the clause. And so you have V1 after the subject NP position. And then you have intermediate material, which is everything direct object, indirect object, and post-verbal particles, all kinds of verbal complements before you have the V2, which is almost always the rightmost element of the clause. So it is really a discontinuous kind of construction. So the specific features of this construction is that so the V1 can mark past perfective, imperfective, or irrealis. The V2 always has fixed form, which is mid-tone for class 1 and low tone for class 2 verbs. So as I said already, V2 is generally the rightmost element of the sentence. One strange thing is that V2 does not require a final vowel, whereas if you use a verb out of the doubling construction at the right age of the sentence, then it requires a final vowel. But in this doubling construction, it doesn't. Like you have a verb occurring where you expect a final vowel, but you don't find it there. And this final vowel is the element that helps you to parse discourse, like it is signaling the end of the sentence. One other thing is I'm talking about iconic, non-iconic doubling, but V2 can itself be iterated iconically. So I'm going to show some of these examples. It's quite bizarre. And the last thing is that the verb doubling construction cannot occur under the scope of standard negation. You can't just negate the construction, and it is not clear whether it is a pragmatic, semantic kind of restriction or a syntactic one. I have the impression that it might be a syntactic restriction. No, it could be a syntactic restriction because the position targeted by the second verb is also the position in which you find the negative marker. But I mean, so this is something to investigate properly. I just want to point out at this stage that the 4 last features of the V2 are really features that you find. They really V2 really behaves as an idiophonic element. So idiophones. If you're not familiar with idiophones, these are depictive lexical items, and in these languages, these are when you do manner modification of a predicate, it is always with idiophonic adverbs, and V2 really has these properties of idiophonic adverbs. So, but this is something we can talk about in another occasion. So in these languages, verb doubling can be iconic or non-iconic. I'm going to focus on the non-iconic ones, but it is important to see, to discuss the iconic ones because it is useful to understand how we get to the iconic ones. So the iconic doubling always has this idea of increase, whether it is horizontal in the sense of distributivity, iteration, or duration. If you do something for a long duration, then you have this horizontal doubling of the verb. I'm going to show you an example. And the vertical increase is like you're talking about magnitude or intensity. And so you have an example here with this construction. Ram left. He took his brothers. There are plenty of brothers. So you have a repetition of V2, take, and then he hid his brothers in the granary. Then you have the verb to hide, which is also iterated iconically to express the either repetitive action of hiding. It is not always clear easy to distinguish between iterative repetition and distributivity, but in certain cases it is clear that it is repetition and not distributive. So this is the kind of meanings that you have. The other kind of iconic doubling is what I call above X, could be beyond X, but the idea is X is the standard realization of the event, and everything above that level, above that standard level, is the vertical increase kind of meaning that you find. And so I don't know if this is a good rendition of it. It's like in this example with the event of dying, in French, je will say, elle est vraiment morte. Like, it's not just normal dying, but dying, I don't know what it means concretely, but dying above the baseline way of dying. So this is the intuition that I have. And I also, gave this example to other speakers of the language who also have the same kind of interpretation, but it is not very clear how. So I was thinking, I mean, we were talking about it yesterday, how to show exactly to pinpoint this intuition. I mean, it could be interesting to show it exactly, but the intuition speakers have for these kinds of construction is like not just normal dying, but above level dying. The same thing for killing. In this example, kill for real. Like yeah, the stone killed her for real. Same thing with this example about pounding with the imperative, like pound it, but for real. And that is probably why the person pounds it for a long period of time. The non-iconic cases I am interested in are those cases where you don't have this idea of increase, or it is not transparent. So I always wonder whether it is. So I consider it to be non-iconic because I can't access the exact meaning, or it is really because they are non-iconic. So this is a question we could have, because this is an example where I don't have the intuition that there is any sort of increase in this example. So this is a normal a discourse from a discourse segment from a narrative. There is a catching event, there is a slaughtering event. Sorry for the violence of. I mean, this is not my invention. This is just like from a folk tale, and eating up. So you have this sequence of events, but you have doubling in all of those. I mean, someone could argue that it is not just normal catching, it is above level catching, above level slaughtering, above level eating. But I find it weird that every event that you that you describe, because this is a very frequent construction. I think in some of the samples that I have, you have a verb doubling construction in every 13 sentences. Like in every 13 sentences, you have verb doubling. Like if in all of those you're expressing the idea of increase, then there is probably something that I don't understand yet. In any case, so now I'm going to tell you some of the hypotheses that I have about what these constructions are doing in the cases where you don't have the idea of increase. So the first hypothesis that I'm exploring right now. So as I said, I didn't say this from the beginning. This is work in progress. I had to say it. So one of the functions that I think, one of the things that I think are happening in this thing, in this data, is the marking of anti-mirativity, which tells you that the moment the speaker uses a verb doubling construction, which is not increase, the speaker is assuming that the information that they are conveying, it's something the hearer could expect, which is different from mirativity, where it is the idea of surprise and unexpectedness that is encoded. So this is one example. He gave it the milk for him to drink. He drank it, like giving milk and drinking it. So this is part of the story. The moment the 49 occurs in the story, this is something you can expect from the previous discourse. Like I gave X the milk for them to drink. They drank it according to the expectation, according to expectation simply. So the interesting thing about this idea of anti-mirativity is that there is another particle in the language, the wa particle that you have here, which clearly has this anti-mirative kind of function in the language. And sometimes you could use the wa instead of the verb doubling construction. So this is actually where this whole idea of encoding anti-mirativity came about. I gave this portion to the story from which this portion was taken to another speaker, not the original speaker. And the moment they got to 49, they were like, I don't understand why this person doubled the verb. If I were the one, I would use wa in that construction. And this wa is, I think I'm going to show you another example where you see interchangeability between verb doubling and wa. So this is something really happening in the language. So it is not just one comment by a speaker who didn't know what they were talking about, but there is something happening here, and there is some variation that we need to account for. And so it is interesting. One other interesting thing about this idea of anti-mirativity is that 25% of the verb doubling constructions that you have in these languages are in bridging and pseudo bridging constructions. I'm going to show you some examples on pseudo bridging. The most important ones are the pseudo bridging ones in which expected information is presented as background. Actually, yeah, expected information is presented as if it were a normal bridging construction. So this example, these are the kinds of things I refer to as bridging constructions. So bridging constructions are this relation between three clauses where you have a target clause and a reference clause and a bridging clause between the two that creates the link. So in this example, the boar children, having born children, hyena had 10 children, hare had 10 children, and you have the bridging construction here, which is actually presented as an adverbial clause because you have this discourse demonstrative, which is here. Another example with bridging. Yeah, so they watch the cattle in the pen, and having done that, everyone talks about something. So you still have doubling here, and this example is very, very interesting because the expression to herd, it is a kind of idiomatic expression where you always use the verb to herd with the guruna, guruna, the pen thing. So it is always by guruna. I don't find the word by on itself. It is always by guruna, and it is the whole idea of by guruna, which is watching the cattle. But when you do the doubling, you don't double the nominal part of it. It is just the verb. So this is already one thing telling you this is probably not a compound, but something else, and it is the something else that we need to understand. And so yeah, so this is so back to the initial example that we had with Fali walking, finding a stick and picking the stick and dying suddenly, where you had doubling. So this is the case where I told you could have wa instead of doubling, because you can see it in the second example. He picked up the stick and died. You clearly have, but so it is this the case with wa is different in the sense that you have a sentence break between the two. So you have the taking sentence, dying, independent sentence. Whereas in the example with doubling, you have an adverbial clause that contains this pseudo bridging clause that contains verb doubling, and then you have the dying event, but it is all part of one sentence. So probably this is also something like you are using wa, sentence boundary, you are using doubling, no sentence boundary. The second kind of hypothesis that I have, which is completely different from the anti-mirativity thing that I just presented, it's about the idea of rejecting any salient belief held by the hearer. And I'm going to show you some illustration with a translation task that I had. So I presented the context 1, 2, and 3 to speakers with a target sentence, which is a target imperative, dry it. Like in one walking riverbank, you find a fish, you bring it home and you ask your son to dry it. Yeah, dry it. So there is nothing planned in that case. In the second case, there is some planning, but there is a selection. So this is actually this description. So there is a selection between two options, either preparing the fish right away in sauce or drying it to cook another day. And in 3, there is just one thing that the person waiting for you at home has in their mind. When you bring the fish, what they do every day is cooking it right away. And I guess, I don't know, probably this is a moment for interaction. Where do you suspect doubling will occur? Put yourself in the Gizay speaker's shoes and try a guess.
In 3, because it's what's expected, rather than there's more than one option.
Yeah. I think you qualify as a Gizay speaker, Masana-Gizey speaker, because so it is only in 3 that you have a doubling. So yeah, I'm not sure what it means, and I need to test this more systematically. But there is already you kind of get a sense of something happening there about what kind of beliefs are there in the common ground. Like for one, there is no expectation at all, nothing is happening, you don't have doubling. In 2, you have a selection between 2 options, but maybe it's not very strong. And in 3, where there is only one salient thing, then you use doubling to reject that thing because you are introducing something new in the common ground. And so I don't know if I want to talk about this example because it's yeah. So this is actually the discourse portion that triggered my reflection about this idea of rejecting a belief. So in this tale, so this is in the beginning of this tale, there is one character who goes to steal another's character property. But whenever the stealing eventuality occurs, the stealer goes alone. Like they always go alone to steal. And then suddenly in this portion, there is something new happening. They are no more going alone. They are going with somebody else. So I was thinking, is it the case that the speaker is the narrator, the storyteller is telling you, wait, from what I've been telling you at this point of the story, you expect this person to continue to go alone to do the stealing, but no, this time they are going with somebody else. So this is where like rejecting this thought that you had. So this is actually where I started thinking about this idea. And so this portion is also very interesting because I had an audio recording of this tale, and I gave it to a different speaker, and I silenced the portion in which you had verb doubling. And then I asked the speakers to tell the same story. And at some point I said, at this point, you have to describe this kind of event, like taking somebody with the character. And I did it with 2 speakers, all of them produced verb doubling in that construction. So this was the first moment I realized there is a rule. I don't yet fully understand, but there is a rule for using this verb doubling construction. And you will see it like the speaker even corrects themselves in this construction. They went first for Savannah monitor and said, no, 9 monitor instead. And then doubling again in the next construction. So there's really a sense of you need to use doubling in this construction, in this discourse. So as a summary, so I showed you cases of where you had doubling that was, in my opinion, clearly iconic with increase, and cases where it was not transparent at all, with the thought that doubling might be marking anti-mutativity or might be used for rejecting beliefs held by hearers. And yeah, if you are a fan of this binary approach, iconic, non-iconic, then you have this neat distinction. Or if, I mean, it makes more sense to be on a scale rather than this binary distinction, then these ones are the most non-iconic ones, the most arbitrary, whereas the increase is on the other edge of the scale. Now, in the literature, for all of those cases, because so the non-iconic doubling is not something that I said it is pervasive in the Chadic and the Masa languages, but I mean, this is not something new. This is not a new topic. You see crazy stuff about reduplication and doubling in all languages, like word class changing, like focus marking, which is non-iconic, and other kinds of things happening. So the treatment about these kinds of facts in the literature is that there are two cognitive forces that drive doubling or reduplication in general. The first is iconicity, because I mean, you see it. I showed you some example from here, and you see it whenever, like whenever you see reduplication or repetition or syntactic repetition, there is this expectation that it is about increase. So it is, I mean, and this is manifested in many different languages. So iconicity is clearly, and by iconicity here, we mean kind of relations of resemblance, like in the cases of onomatopoeia, for example, or you have isomorphic kind of relations, like the kinds that I showed for Gizey and Masana. And the second force is semantic extension, so semantic shift. So the general idea is, for all those non-iconic cases, there is an iconic source. Like we always start from an iconic motivation, then we through diachronic shift, we go into domains that are less iconic than the source ones. And of course, iconicity can be lost. Same thing for lexical items. A word can be onomatopoeic from start, then through different kinds of phonological or semantic extensions, change into something that is totally not connected to the original iconic source. And yeah, so this is kind of a tree representation of the semantic shifts that are attested, that are found in the literature. So you have this bifurcation into diagrammatic. This is those are the cases I refer to as isomorphic kind of sound meaning mapping. And then you have the imagic ones, which are like indexical, like you go from baby babbling and everything related to babies involve reduplication, then diminutive. I mean, these are things that are found in the literature. And then for the other more diagrammatic kinds of things, you have plenty of semantic shifts that are attested in the literature. But the funny thing is, you don't have, that's why I repeated them here, you don't have the kinds of things happening in Masana and Gizey. I don't see that reported in the literature. And I should tell you that I'm not a total fan of, so I understand that it is useful because it is there in the languages. It is useful to think of those non-iconic cases as possible developments from an iconic source. But I don't think it accounts for all the cases. I think so. Today I wanted us to talk about just a few examples. I have other cases of doubling phenomena in these languages that are, I mean, for some cases you have things like phonological cases of reduplication. I mean, I don't see any iconic source for those cases. Like, and even for full reduplication in these languages, or for the cases of verbs, you have cases where it would be very difficult to argue for the kinds of semantic shifts that you see in this example. But let's pretend for a few seconds that we are total fans of this idea that every non-iconic doubling process comes from an iconic source. Then there are probably two models through which we can derive what is happening in the Gizey Masana data. So we go from this iconic source of increase to an extension, a single extension to capture expected P and not Q that we just described. Then the second model is you have two distinct semantic shifts with still the increase at the base, but with either expected P or not Q as the first extension, and from there you get a second extension. So these are the two models. I'm not quite sure what is the model that is used in this languages, but I just wanted to map this out. But I kind of see a connection between the above X kind of vertical increase and the idea of rejecting a salient belief, because I think it's all a matter of contrast actually. Like you select an alternative and you reject the other one. Like when you say X died for real, it is not just a normal dying, which is the baseline. You reject that alternative to select the upper realization of the thing, which is almost the same thing happening with the rejection, because there are, like in the example about drying it, there is one belief that the speaker had, and you are rejecting, you are selecting another alternative and rejecting the thing. So that's the connection that I see. Interestingly, in these languages, another kind of verb doubling construction is used for corrective and contrastive predicate focus, as you can see in these examples. So in the first example, this one, the boys are pushing the hood, or they are taking it instead. So you have this doubling of the verb to push. But this particular construction, I mean, for the clearly focused one, you have a new morphology added there. This is the resultative. At the start of the talk, I talked about a morpheme that is used to use verbs in adjectival function. This is actually the morpheme. It's a kind of resultative perfect item that you use. So are they pushing or taking it? You have this doubling that is used to do the contrast. Same thing with the example. The second example, the woman pushed and beat Damsu. No, she pushed him instead. Like, so rejecting one alternative and selecting the other. But at this stage, I'm not sure how to put the anti-mirative kind of function in this whole idea that you have an iconic base and you do semantic shift to get to the non-iconic meaning. I totally don't see how to motivate the transition, and I was hoping that you could share your ideas with me with the limited number of data that I showed you. So before I take your questions, I just want to, Joey, we are doing good in terms of time, right? Okay. So just thank the contributors. So these are the persons that I kept disturbing on WhatsApp, like, what do you think about this construction? What do you think about this? So these are the people. And then for the narrative, there are plenty. about 14 Gizey speakers gave me their stories, and about 8 for Masana. And I also want to thank Ladisco, my Brussels laboratory, and the Fondation Wiener and Spark that funds my research in Brussels. So thank you for your attention, and let's talk now.
Thank you very much, Guillaume. So we have at least 15 minutes, a little more time for questions. If you're online and you want to ask a question, you can type it into the Q&A or raise your hand and I'll try to unmute you. Anyone want to get us started here with a question? I can sit down and look at, I know this one. Okay, go ahead, Charles.
I was wondering about the perception side of the coin. So if somebody doesn't do the repetition, how is that interpreted by speakers? Is it, other than this is unusual, like is it confusing or
Yeah, perception. If you don't double, how is it perceived? Like, I would feel like, yeah, I guess I've not tested perception specifically, but I would guess, yeah. So this is probably one of the areas that I need to investigate more, because probably I'll get more answers from there. But there is, like, when you read stories, I don't have a specific expectation for doubling to occur, because so initially this whole idea of doubling was considered as an aspectual marker of event completion, event culmination, etc. But I mean, as I said from the beginning, just from verb morphology alone, you have a clear sense of completeness. So if this thing is an aspectual marker, then it's doing something totally different. So when I pick a story and I read it just from the marking of past perfective, I mean everything seems clear. I don't have a specific expectation of doubling, and I also guess these whole ideas of for example, let's take the case of anti-meritivity. Like, okay, this information is expected. There are tons of ways you can express this idea. Like, just from the discourse context, you can build a sense of expectedness. There is this WA particle that is used also to tell you, okay, this information I'm giving you is something you could expect. So yeah, so the only perception perspective that I have is mine from listening to the tales and reading them. There's no expectation about doubling. And I think there are stories in which you even don't have doubling at all and everything is fine. But in some stories, you just happen to have them. So as I said, like in one doubling in every 13 sentence. Yeah, so so just to follow up, what were your ideas?
No, I was just thinking because some of the explanations for why you would do it seem to be oriented towards the listener. Like, you want to counter something that you think the listener might not hold in their beliefs or something. So it's interesting to think then about, like, are you actually providing something necessary for the listener, or is that just all about you?
Yeah.
But if it happens so regularly, I mean, I come from phonetics, so very different, but I usually expect that if something happens regularly on the speaker side, that there's a reason, and if you were to impair that or like interrupt that, that also affects the living. I don't know. For this.
I think so generally, so this is really the idea, like marking information as expected. Like, so this is the speaker doing the thing, like not it's nothing about the listener. This is the speaker making their assumptions and using these particles to tell you, oh, you speaker, I assume that at this stage, this information that I'm going to give you is something that you expected. And frankly, I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are about it, but I don't see I don't see the benefits, like the benefits of doing this particular thing, and that's why I've been very hesitant to go to that direction. But yeah, but
On that point, could it ever be interpreted as rude if you
as
rude if you use the doubling for somebody and then they
rude.
interpret it as being rude to them because they, of course, they knew that they needed.
No.
That's good if I ever forget.
Yeah, thanks very much, Guillaume. Yeah, really interesting, really rich data, and lots of questions. But I'll maybe just ask a couple, and then follow on from what Charlie was saying. So, of course, I'm going to come from the perspective of Bantu languages, and what talked a lot to Yenika about verb doubling kind of constructions. So you sort of start with this idea of some kind of like increase of something, and then look at places where that doesn't seem to happen. And I think lots of the work on Bantu and some of Yenika's work is on things like kind of truth, virum focus, which I think for me I have to do quite a lot of gymnastics to think of that as an increase in something. So it's really like emphasizing that something did indeed happen. Which probably isn't an increase. Maybe it's an increase in your certainty or something. I'm just sort of and that's quite nice because you talked about things like narrativity and this broader discussion of like expectation and things like that. So I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with like that literature, but it would be interesting to look at that from the kind of cross-linguistic perspective, the cases, because when you look at the iconic and non-iconic, trying to think what is that broader space that all of these constructions have in common if they do nothing in common. So I think thinking about like truth focus, virum focus, quite interesting. So that's a comment really. The other thing is about negation. So again, Bantu languages which allow you to do verb doubling, and then there's ones where you can't. This is all considered to be in the focus space. So it's not surprising that you can't then negate it, because negation is somehow inherently focal, because you are again drawing speaker or hearer's attention to the fact that this is unexpected. So if we take affirmative to be the standard, then negation is already somehow different. So we see an interesting interaction between focus and negation. And I think you had an example where you said verb doubling can't be under the scope of standard negation.
You can.
So again, I think there's some interesting sort of like parallels there. And then this is more of a question, because I don't know more about the language as a whole. I'm wondering about other elements of the syntax. So you have some examples there where I think you've had things intervening between the doubling. But you have some examples where the doubling is like double. And I think I saw an example where you have 3 doublings, like a tripling. So the same verb 3 times. Do you have anything to say about the syntax there? Like what is going on, the structure? Like, can you have as many as you want? Can you have things in between the 1, 2, 3?
No. So there is always this distinction that I make between so initially my initial distinction was between verb doubling as a single repetition of the verb, and then you have this verb iteration kinds where you have 3, 4. So it depends on the communicative intentions of the speaker. So for the verb doubling itself, so you have V1, then you have all these post-verbal things, and then you have V2. But for the iteration kind, you can have as much as repetition as you want, but nothing intervenes between those copies.
Okay.
And so now about the syntax, the interesting thing to note is that everything pluractionality, that's actually the site, like the right age of the sentence is where everything happens about pluractionality. So you can express distributive by doubling, I don't know, the final pronoun. Like I had an example of somebody going to find good stuff for their wives, and then you have their wife repeated several times to express this idea of repetitive action. So you can do repetitive action. So you can repeat nominal items. You can repeat idiophonic adverbs in that particular position and nowhere else. And then you can also iterate verbs in that particular position. So that's why, I mean, I consider V2 to be an adverbial element. And so concerning the syntax, so when people see two realizations of a verb, I mean, one of the popular ways of analyzing it is to go towards copy kinds of copy and move, copy and trace kind of things, like there is a base generated verb at some point, it moves, then the trace of it is realized, and then you have the two surface realization of the thing. I think there is plenty of facts in the languages that are against a movement theory of these constructions. I think it's a base generated kind of thing. It is selected individually from the lexicon and placed there as a modifier. How it comes to be, it's another question that one needs to answer. But yeah, everything productional, that's where it occurs. Yeah.
Really interesting. Thank you.
Come up with a question from online. There's two there. I'll read the first one from Fatima. It says, very interesting indeed. My take is that doubling adds markedness, increase in effect, emphasis, and a pinch of comical effect. And I was wondering if doubling occurs in certain categories of verbs, for example, imperatives. If I can just add to that. So like it seemed like most of your data was from narratives.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what the comical effect is does doubling happen outside of narratives? And then under comment on imperatives, your thing about not Q, is that only in imperatives? I mean, those are the two things that connect your comment to your data.
Yeah. So the not Q thing is not only in imperative, because I give this example in narrative where it was totally not the case. And then the other point was about whether you find it outside of narratives. Yes, you find it outside, because I mean, even in procedural, I don't have plenty of them, but even in procedural texts, if you have to, each time you need to do bridging to introduce the next phase, then at some point there will be a case where you would double the verb, like having done X, dang happens. Then in those bridging construction, there's a high probability that you find doubling, and that's not narrative. And I mean, even in normal everyday talk, yeah, you find it. Like I have this example of so you can for example express existential perfects with doubling. Like if you came to my house and I invited you, you met me when I was eating, and I invite you to join me to eat, and you decline my invitation by telling me that you had eaten before you come. You could say anti-AT, which is doubling the verb, and it is an existential perfect in the sense that it is telling you that my having eaten exists, and in that case you clearly have a doubling, which doesn't bring this theatrical connotation that you find in folk tales.
Another question. Got one more question online. But anyone here have a question or comment? So I'll read you the question from Eugenia. Thanks, Guillaume. Interesting stuff as usual. One thing I noticed that wasn't discussed in the talk, perhaps. So the first instance of the verb has a specific tone, but then the doubled verb is different.
Yeah.
Is this regular? Is there a rule? And does this mean that the doubled verb is not marked for aspect, but be analyzed as a consecutive form, or does it repeat the aspect of the previous verb?
Yeah. So it doesn't. So I consider it not to mark. So like I consider it not to mark any kind of inflectional information, because the normal distinction between past perfect and imperfective is all done on V1. And even analytical tense and aspect is realized with auxiliary verbs before V1. But the V2, which is there, has this fixed form, as I said at the start of the talk, with a mid-tone for class 1 verbs and a low tone for class 2 verbs. So that's the rule. You just need to learn that for class 1 mid, for class 2 low tone. And I suspect that that is the base form of the verb actually in these languages. So I think the only information that is encoded there is verb classification. So basically telling you there are 2 classes of verbs in these languages. This is one class, this is the other class.
Good, well, we are just about out of time, so maybe we'll end our session there. Welcome to chat with you afterwards, and otherwise we look forward to seeing you next week. And thanks as well to everyone who joined us online.